Welcome to Seductive Chronicles. In today's video, we're about to unfold a story that gently traces the invisible lines between memory, comfort, and the human longing to be understood. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was one of those afternoons when the entire world seems to hold its breath, a time suspended between late summer warmth and the first hints of an evening chill. The house was quiet in a way that made me feel as though I was the only person left inside it. I remember standing by the window, cup of chamomile malt tea cradled in my hands, watching the wind tease the tops of the trees. The steam rising from my cup curled upward in slow, twisting ribbons that reminded me of all the small memories that collect over a lifetime, soft, unremarkable moments that somehow matter more than the big ones when you look back. Then there was the knock. It wasn't loud or demanding, just a gentle, steady sound that stirred something in me I hadn't felt in a long time. A sudden awareness, a flutter of anticipation that made my fingers tighten around the mug. For a moment, I simply listened, my breath held captive by the quiet between those knocks. I set the cup down, wiped my palms on the front of my sweater, and walked slowly to the door, feeling both hesitant and strangely expectant. When I opened it, I felt the world tilt ever so slightly. Standing there was Daniel. His name arrived in my mind before my lips could form it. Daniel, Margot's son. He had grown taller since I'd last seen him, or perhaps it was simply that he carried himself differently. Gone was the restless, searching energy of a young man on the brink of adulthood. In its place was something quieter, a gravity that made him seem both older and somehow softer. "Hi," he said, his voice lower, steadier than I remembered. "I was driving through and, I don't know, I thought I'd stop by." For a heartbeat, I couldn't find words. Then, warmth flooded in to meet the surprise, and I smiled. "Well," I said, "you've chosen a good day for it. Come in." He stepped over the threshold with a kind of careful reverence, as though he feared that even his footsteps might wake some sleeping memory in the walls. The faint scent of sandalwood clung to him, mixed with the dry sweetness of summer air. I led him to the kitchen, where the late afternoon light fell across the old oak table and golden pools. He sat down across from me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. I poured him tea, listening to the quiet click of the cup as I set it before him. We began with small things, the kind of polite catching up that people do when they haven't seen each other in years. He told me about his job, some corporate work that sounded demanding in the way all such jobs are, and how he'd moved to a new city that didn't quite feel like home yet. He spoke of Margot, how she was slowing down, how sometimes she forgot dates or names. The more he talked, the more I noticed the weariness behind his words. It was in the way he looked down when he spoke of his mother, the way his fingers traced the rim of the cup again and again, as if trying to ground himself in the ordinary texture of it. "There's something comforting about this house," he said finally, voice quiet. "It smells the same, like cinnamon and old books. I don't know, it reminds me of feeling safe." His eyes lifted to meet mine, and for the first time, I saw the ache he carried. I reached across the table, letting my hand rest lightly over his. His skin was warm, and he didn't pull away. If anything, he seemed steady under the contact, as though the simple act of being touched, without question, without explanation, was what he'd been needing all along. "I know what you mean," I said softly. "I think some places hold the memory of who we were." We sat there, the silence growing comfortable. Outside, a pair of mourning doves cooed from the fence, their calls rising and falling in the golden air. When he finally spoke again, his voice had a new vulnerability. "I've been trying to be everything, good son, good employee, good whatever, and most days it feels like I'm failing at all of it." I thought of Margot, of the many times she'd sat in this very kitchen telling me how proud she was of Daniel, how much she believed in the man he was becoming. And looking at him now, I knew she'd been right. "You're carrying so much," I said. "It's no wonder you feel heavy." His eyes welled, but he blinked the tears back, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping his throat. "I didn't mean to come here and unload everything on you." "You didn't," I told him. "You came here to be human for a while. There's no shame in that." The afternoon lengthened around us, the shadows growing longer across the kitchen floor. We sat there for what felt like hours, the quiet between us filling up with all the things neither of us needed to say out loud. At one point, he told me about a girl he'd loved in college, how he'd let her go because he thought he needed to prove something to himself first. His voice trembled as he spoke of it, the regret still fresh after all those years. As he spoke, I was struck by how rarely people let themselves be seen in their unguarded moments. There was something profoundly brave in his honesty, in the way he offered up the raw pieces of his heart without expecting anything in return. When evening finally began to slip in around us, he stood reluctantly, keys dangling from his fingers. "You're welcome here any time," I said, following him to the door. "Even if all you want is a cup of tea and some quiet." He turned to look at me, and in his eyes, I saw something like relief, a deep exhale after holding his breath for too long. "Thank you," he murmured, and then he hugged me. It wasn't a hug of passion or longing. It was something purer, the hug of someone who needed to remember they weren't alone in the world. After he left, the house felt different. Not emptier, just changed, as though his presence had rearranged something in the air and in me. I moved through the evening in a gentle daze. I didn't turn on the television or pick up a book. Instead, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the hum of cicadas in the darkness. I thought about all the ways people show up in our lives, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes quietly desperate for something they can't name. And I thought about how easy it would have been to pretend I didn't see his pain, but I had seen it. And I realized that in seeing him, I had allowed something in myself to be seen too. The days that followed were marked by a softness I hadn't felt in years. I found myself humming while I washed dishes, stopping in the middle of folding laundry just to look out the window and smile. Margot called the next morning. Her voice was fragile, edged with worry. "Did Daniel stop by?" she asked. "He did," I said. "We talked for a while." She was quiet for a moment. "He's been different lately. I'm afraid he's carrying things he won't talk about." I felt a pang in my chest. "He's doing his best," I told her. "He's just trying to figure out where he belongs." She sighed, a sound that held years of maternal hope and heartache. "He always did feel at home with you. I suppose some people never really outgrow the places that made them feel safe." After we hung up, I sat for a long time with the phone resting in my lap. I thought of all the children I had watched grow up, how some had disappeared into their own lives without backward glance, while others, like Daniel, circled back, searching for a piece of themselves they'd left behind. 2 evenings later, the knock came again. He stood there, holding a small paper bag. "I brought pie," he said, a shy smile tugging at his mouth. We ate on the porch as the sky turned a soft lavender. He told me he was thinking about taking time off from work, about how tired he was of performing a life instead of living it. I listened, the same way I had before, without interruption, without judgment. As the stars blinked awake overhead, he turned to me. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I didn't come here looking for anything, but I think I found something anyway. I didn't ask what it was. Some truths don't need defining. When he hugged me before he left, it felt different. as though he was claiming a space he hadn't realized he needed. And in the quiet that followed, I felt it too, a recognition of something tender and unspoken between us. Days passed, and then weeks. He came by again and again, sometimes with pie, sometimes with nothing but his presence. Each time, the house seemed to settle more around him. Each time, something in both of us healed a little. Until one rainy afternoon, when he arrived soaked through, a small journal in his hands. "It was my dad's," he said, voice rough. "I thought maybe you'd understand it the way I do." And when I opened it and read those simple words, "Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when not to say anything," I felt my heart break and mend all in the same moment. I looked up at him, and in that silence, I knew this was what it meant to belong to each other in the quiet, wordless ways. This was what it meant to be truly seen. And sometimes that is all the love a person ever needs. As the rain continued to whisper against the windows that evening, I sat alone in the quiet house, the old journal resting in my lap. And I thought about how Daniel's visits had gently unfolded something inside me I hadn't realized had been waiting all this time. A reminder that connection doesn't always arrive in grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes it comes as a knock at the door on an ordinary afternoon. A shared cup of tea. A hand reaching across the table. The simple human willingness to sit beside another person in their unspoken ache. And maybe that is enough. Thank you for joining me today on Seductive Chronicles. If this story touched you, please don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories about the quiet, unexpected ways our lives intertwine. Until next time, may you always find someone who sees you just as you are, in a place where you feel at home.